So I'm George Jones, Florida.
Mark Perry, Florida Ocean Graphic.
Darrell Brand, Palm Cove Yacht Club.
Jim Moyer, Marine Resources Council.
Charles Brandy, President's Council of Hutchinson Island.
And
Todd Weissing, Lighthouse Point.
Sherry Anchor, Conservation Alliance, St. Lucie County.
Marty Baum, Indian River Keeper. Jim Harder, Stewart Fly Roder.
Oh, Joe Giuliano, private citizen.
Gail Ryan, Martin County's Soil and Water Conservation District.
Rick Hall, River Warrior.
Chuck Horn, Workers Yacht Club.
Any members?
Wayne Custer, Four Winds on the River Condo Association.
Great.
Marcy Pitkin, Treasure Coast Unitarian Universalist Church.
That's Hartsville, St. Lucie County, with the Women Voters. Jackie Transmitter, Martin County Conservation Alliance. I'm sorry, Lou.
Richard Earth Harbor Ridge Yacht Club.
Paul Gray, Alpine, Florida.
Jay O'Loughlin, Guardians of Martin County.
Dave Carlson, River Vista Homeowners Association.
Regina Wood, Martin County Chapter of the Florida Native Land Society.
Joanne Swan, St. Lucie Sailing Club.
Any more members?
Fred Miller from the Stewart Road River Club.
Very good.
Linda Grand, American Association of University Women.
Very good. All righty. And with that last introduction, I'm going to hand this over to Daryl.
Great.
And we've got a new member formed to vote on.
Linda, where are you? You want to stand up, please? Linda is with the American Association of University Women and has applied for voting membership. Do you want to tell us about your organization and your association with our river and our mission statement?
Well, the American Association of University Women is a nationwide network with more than 170,000 members and supporters, 1,000 branches, and 800 college and university institution partners. Here, our Stewart branch has almost 100 members. For 130 years, AAUW members have examined and taken positions on the fundamental issues of the day. And certainly, we need to bring the River Coalition information to our members.
Shooting pictures and doing it double duty here.
One arm guy.
Do we have a motion to accept?
Move we accept them as members.
Second, Jim Moore.
All in favor?
Aye.
Well, first of all, this is a milestone. Thank you. We have now reached 100 members in our organization. And I also had your association of 170,000 members adding to our total. So.
Is there some bonus for being 100?
A boat ride.
Yes, I believe we have some cookies outside.
You get to get us a pair of glasses to read the bottom of all we have to do.
The fine print down here. Actually, I was going to say the bonus is you bring the cookies next week. Our next one.
Can I ask who made the second?
All right. We've got chairman's comments, and I'm going to turn some of that over to Mark, because he was just a couple of meetings, if I'm not mistaken, on some of the issues that we were discussing that are upcoming. You pointed out to me we've got a BMAP meeting coming up. We can wait till we go around then if you want. I don't have too current actions. There's we're still dealing with SB 10 and the smaller footprint that's been put out, and the fact that many groups, ourselves included, would like to see a much bigger footprint and be able to move more water south. So that's an ongoing issue that we just need to keep the pressure on and keep attending meetings and keep voicing our concerns to. We've been to Tallahassee. There's phone calls that can still be made, and just keep the pressure on. And that's where we're at with that. Don't have a whole lot of other comments. So I think from that point we'll move to the River Kids. Nick?
Hello.
Mike?
Sure.
I don't know. I think so. I don't know too much.
Hello. Hi. I just wanted to say thank you to Tyler Treadway. I forgot to thank him last month for the 12 Days of Christmas. And he took, 12 different organizations here in Martin County and helped to raise money for them. And he does a great job. And we raised a lot of money for our next event, which is April 7th at Sills Point Park, 10 to 1. And what it is the kids will be collecting trash on the beach on their own time.
What's the date?
April 7th, it's a Saturday, 10 to 1, and it is an event where the kids take trash off the beach or the river, and they make art, sculptures, whatever it may be, and then we're going to send the photos to politicians with notes on them and messages to the elected officials locally and statewide. And also a celebration of our 3rd edition workbook, so that'll finally come out, and that'll be ponied to the schools next month. Also, I wanted to bring to everybody's attention, these signs were made last spring at Sills Point Park at our bucket event, our trash bucket event. We have a lot of them, and they're all in my garage, and I would love to see them around the county, in the parks. We do have some that are in Sills Point Park and a few other parks. I'm not sure where else, Jackie. Do you know the other parks they're in, or just Sills Point?
There was one in Halcatioke.
Okay.
Right, and of course, people can always buy one.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
To support the kids,
To
because
support kids.
there's probably 100.
So like how much are they?
I don't know.
Whatever you
That goes
wanna
up to
give.
Jackie, she's the business
Whatever you want to give.
$1.
That'll work.
So we went to the county commission meeting a few months ago, the River Kids did, and we had asked them if we could please disperse them throughout the county. So we're waiting to hear, and we do need to take action on that, and if anybody would like to help us with that, that would be great. I also wanted to say, I can't remember, I think that's it for now. And if anybody has any questions or wants a workbook, they're out there on the bench, and they all have a sticker sheet that is supposed to go inside the workbook, so don't forget to get the sticker sheet also.
Nick, tell us about,
Donation for the Blessing of the Fleet.
Yeah.
Blessing of the Fleet.
Okay, oh yes, that's right, the Blessing of the Fleet. River Kids were the recipients, and we received $500 for the Blessing of the Fleet, and that will go towards something really wonderful for our local area regarding the awareness on the river discharges. So we've had a really fun day out there. We had 2 vessels with a bunch of river kids, and it was wonderful. So thank you to them. And if Daryl has anything else to add, or Jackie, anything to add on river kids?
I'll just quickly say that, hi everybody, I'm Jackie Burrow, and especially hello my brother, who I haven't seen in so long. I've been traveling with the Constitution Review Commission, which has taken me all over the state, and I carry these workbooks in my briefcase, and I pass them out, and people love them. I gave one most recently to Governor Graham at the Graham Center in Gainesville. I gave one to Danny Washington, who's a television star, about nature. She's the first African-American woman to have her own environmental show. And I've had a number, at least 5 college students who are educators get the books and are writing about them as far as, exploring education in the future with environmentalism. And so these books are making their way everywhere, and thank you, Nick, for keeping this alive, because without her and without everybody else's support, the kids wouldn't have such a loud voice. I mentioned
I just want to say one more thing. Long River Kids talk. But Harbor Branch Oceanographic Institute up in Fort Pierce has also asked us to keep the workbooks up there on hand for any of the kids that go through there. So that's pretty awesome that we're in a big institution. So thank you to Barbara Osborne for that.
and if you don't have a workbook,
Got a report on the
they're on the table.
Climate Bureau?
I'm Todd Weising. I'm the coordinator of the Rivers Coalition Speakers Bureau. What our job is to take our message out into the community. We have 2 speaking engagements coming up next month. We've been invited to go to the Stewart Yacht and Country Club. We've also been invited to go back to Ballantrae This is a group of fantastic folks that they know how to party, have a good time, and the entry to see this star right here talk for 10 minutes is a check contribution to the Rivers Coalition. So can't ask for anything better than that, a party and to get to see Marty. So if you have an organization, they have a meeting, and you would like us to bring our message to you, we'd love to join you. So please see me and we'll set it up. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, that's all we've got on the agenda. So we're gonna get ready and we're gonna turn this over to Mr. Jay O'Laughlin for the Guardians of Martin County for our presentation for this evening. Jay, we appreciate you being here and looking forward to hearing from you.
I very much appreciate the invitation, and I hope to present some ideas to you that you may find interesting. I'm sure you will. At the meeting last month, Brandon Tucker was here and he wore a jacket and tie, and I want to look as good as he did, so at least the clothing. I picked up this, and that's why we're all here, I think. And I want to hit on one of these 5 bullets pretty hard tonight, and that's that these discharges expose citizens to dangerous pathogens. We all know that, but people outside of our area really don't seem to be aware of it. So this is my outline. I'm a professor emeritus, and I'm a member of the Society of Policy Scientists. That's not political scientists, that's policy scientists. We have to deal with what the politicians do when they create policies. So it's a challenge, but my specialty, natural resources. So I always start with science, so I'm going to give you a little rundown on the science, and then, because I do policy, a little rundown on policy, what it's all about, and then the district's plan, reactions to it, and Senator Negron was hoping the district would go outside the box. They haven't, so we'll talk about that. I have, and then we'll hit on the public health. Start with the science.
Can everybody hear him? We'll have them get a microphone.
I'm talking right now. Okay. This report was paid for by the Florida Senate in 2014 and delivered to them in March 2015. We can thank Senator Negron for this. Options to reduce the discharges and send more water south. It's a review of the relevant plans and projects to move more fresh water from the lake to the Everglades. And as far as I'm concerned, it's the Bible on the science of proposals. The review was stimulated by the releases of fresh water and the substantial negative ecological and economic impacts. Better? Okay. The review team concluded that the solution is enormous increases in storage and treatment of water both north and south of the lake. And this requires significant long-term investment in the infrastructure of this broken plumbing system. Substantial reduction in discharges will require additional land between the lake and the Everglades protection area. That means the Everglades agricultural area. Need some land there. And I identified options. One, purchase land from sugar growers, or acquire it somehow. And another option is to use the existing state-owned lands in the Everglades agricultural area. This is mostly what I'm going to talk about tonight. Use the wildlife management areas in the southern portion of the EAA. Reinforcing what the University of Florida said, this is from the National Academy of Sciences, which which Congress gave them the mission to report on progress every 2 years. How are they coming with that Everglades restoration stuff down in Florida? So this is a pretty big 400 or 500 page book that they put out every 2 years talking about progress on these. So just one hit on this. The scientists at the national level questioned some of the hydrologic goals that are embedded in the restoration plan. They said more storage will likely be needed to accommodate changes in the future in the quantity and intensity of runoff to be expected. Let's take a look at policy. Going back to 1993, the Florida Everglades Forever Act. To the greatest extent possible, wasteful discharges of fresh water to tide shall be reduced. Legacy Florida Act 2016 gives preference to Everglades restoration projects that reduce harmful discharges. And then we have SB 10 from last year, officially the Water Storage Reservoirs Act of 2017. Emergency exists because of the high volume freshwater discharges. It has public health impacts, extensive environmental harm to wildlife and aquatic ecosystems. And we'll get on to public health later. Increasing water storage is necessary. The SERP projects, the Everglades restoration projects, should receive priority funding, such as the Everglades Agricultural Area Reservoir Project to the south of the lake. The optimal configuration of this EAA reservoir project must include sufficient water quality treatment capacity. And that's the issue today. It takes land to do that, so getting more land is really what the issue is all about. This act prohibited eminent domain. It said if additional land is necessary, it can only come from willing sellers of their property. Can't take it away from them. The district and the board are authorized to negotiate the amendment or termination of leases on lands within the EAA. The wildlife management areas are owned by the state, they're held in trust for all of us. And the trustees are the governor and his cabinet. They lease those lands to the Fish and Wildlife Commission. They can cancel those leases. The reservoir plan from the district. This is pretty fresh stuff, as you all know. I'm sure you all follow this closely. They identified their preferred alternative. It will, bullet one, send more than 300,000 acre-feet of water south to the Everglades. It will achieve a 55% reduction in discharge volumes to the estuaries, to the St. Lucie, to the Caloosahatchee. It's a halfway job. And here's a graphic that they use. It's really simple to understand. It's got two SERP goals. At the bottom, increase the flow to the Everglades. And on December 21st, when they threw this up in front of the public, they were close to achieving that goal. They've done some tweaking since then. Every time the district comes before the public, the numbers change. So they're pushing pretty close to that 100%. Reducing the estuary flows. They're down in the low 50s. They're still down in the low 50s. Half the job. Reactions to the plan. We'll look first at the Everglades Foundation. Did any of you attend the Everglades Foundation presentation last night? Okay, good. Yeah, I knew there would be folks in the room who attended that. I'm going to talk about maybe some of the things they talked about, but maybe some other things too. And then community conversation, January 4th, hosted by T.C. Palm. How many of you were there? I know a lot of you were there. I remember seeing you there. Senator Joe Negron was featured there, and so we spent some time with him. In December, the Everglades Foundation wrote to Mr. Marks and with an alternative concept for the project. They proposed a 240,000 acre-foot reservoir on 17,000 acres with a water depth of 14 feet, not the 10,000 acre, 23 foot high reservoir that the district has proposed. The foundation proposed stormwater treatment areas on 13,000 acres to treat these new flows and leave the A1 flow equalization basin alone. They did not identify where those 13,000 acres should be, nor did they say where the 17,000 acres for the reservoir ought to be. But the law, SB 10, makes it pretty clear that part of that reservoir is going to be on the A2 parcel in the southern part of the Everglades. I'll show you a map here for those of you who need some reminding. Dr. Tom Van Lent was interviewed. He said, this proposal doesn't do enough to treat water before it's sent south. Optimizing the reservoir, as the law requires, is a balance between increased flow and treatment of pollutants. He said, we're trying to find a way that does both. He didn't say anything about discharges. But of course, we know that every gallon of water that goes south is a gallon that doesn't go into the estuaries. They came out with this last week. It's a about a 20-page report, I think, maybe a little short of that, full of graphs and a few equations and lots of technical talk. But put simply, more STAs equal more water that can be redirected back to the Everglades and less discharges into the estuaries. Now we'll go to January 4th. Here's Senator Negron. And Dr. Van Lent was there, and he presented his idea very briefly in about 1 minute to the group. And outside the box options were called for by Senator Negron, and as yet the district hasn't done that. But I have, and my colleague and friend Joe Giglio. Joe, stand up.
Go Joe.
Go Joe. We have been working on this independently, and we decided to work together on this. So we presented this a 20-page paper to Senator Negron, and I had talked to him before the meeting. We had talked to his staffers before the meeting, and he said at the meeting that he was eager to read it, and so he was presented with a copy there at the meeting. I haven't heard anything from him since. Okay, now what's in that paper that Joe and I did? This is the box. It's the A2 reservoir and the A1 FEB at the southern edge of the Everglades agricultural area. Notice just below the A2 reservoir is the Holy Land Wildlife Management Area, and just to the west of it is the Rotenberger Wildlife Management Area. I mean, it's as plain as the nose on your face. Now, that little area that I just showed is down at the bottom of this map. This is the entire Everglades agricultural area, except for some of the western stuff there. A nice map by the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Commission identifying much of the ownership. Now, the Everglades Foundation, like many conservation organizations, is hoping that the state will cancel the leases on these blue lands within the EAA, and that the sugar companies north of the reservoir site are going to say, okay, we'll exchange lands with you. Well, that hasn't happened, and if you still think it's going to happen, I don't know. Maybe you ought to think about something else. But there's one company in control, and Stewart News wrote about this a couple of weeks ago, and that's the Okilanta Corporation, which is a subsidiary of the Florida Crystals Corporation, owned by the Fonua family of Palm Beach. So, the Everglades Foundation, I already mentioned where they think the A2 parcel, if you get those western lands in it, that's 17,000 acres, so you could build a whole reservoir there. But then you need 13,000 acres somewhere else. You're going to get from Florida Crystals? No? Well, then where do you get it? Look south, look south.
Holy Land.
There they are. Okay, so the Everglades Foundation could have said, hey, just west of the EAA, there's a C-139 annex. The district plans to build an FEB there to feed the stormwater treatment area 5 and 6. That leaves about 15,000 acres that are unaccounted for. That's citrus lands that are no longer growing citrus, which the state bought from U.S. Sugar Corp in 2010. You and I bought it. So if you take those 15,000 acres, you can't convey the water from the reservoir over there. You'd have to go through the wildlife management area and all that. Why not just exchange that land for lands in the eastern part of the Holy Land? Okay, you could do that. But then you get 13,000 acres for STAs. That's what the Everglades Foundation wants. I'm going to show you what that's going to do. Bear with me. Our option, Joe and I came up with, Joe has written about this before. I've been thinking about it much more lately than Joe, is why not use these wildlife management areas? Holy Land, 35,000 acres. Rotenberg, 29,000 acres. Put that reservoir water in those areas. Make them flow through marshes. Improve the wildlife habitat. Probably won't have any deer though. It's a deer for ducks deal. Okay, we make some assumptions in our analysis that the SDAs will be filled all year, that the Everglades Protection Area south of the EAA can take all the water as long as it meets the water quality standards. And the longer that water stays in the STAs, the more likely it is to meet the water quality standards. Way too much here. So just look in the orange box there. We got 4 options we're talking about. The pink is the district option, yellow the Everglades option, foundation option, and our hybrid options, H1 and H2. H1 uses just Holy Land, H2 uses Holy Land and Rotenberg WMAs. So our options, either one of them, would keep the water in for 28 days. That's a week longer than the Everglades Foundation, and more than twice as much as the district's option would do. The Everglades Foundation is concerned that the district's option will not meet water quality standards, and they're probably right. And this new report they have is pretty convincing on that. Okay, discharges, there they are. The last 38 years of discharges into the St. Lucie. A lot of variability there, for sure. Now, this is my model. I don't use the Water Management District's black box. This is my model. Actual discharges, and this is the South Florida Water Management District is going to send 300,000 acre-feet south, which means 300,000 acre-feet that don't go into the estuaries. The Caloosahatchee gets 2 gallons for every gallon that we get. So we get the benefit of a reduction of 100,000 acre-feet per year. And what that would do is take care of it in some years, but not all. The Everglades Foundation improves on that slightly. Our H1 option improves on it quite a bit. And if you add both of the wildlife management areas, you come up with that. Now, the district, if its proposal had been in place in 1980, we wouldn't have had to send 29% of the discharges out. So that's the savings. Our H1 option would, by itself, reduce discharges 50%. The H2 option, using both wildlife management areas, reduces it 69%. Now we're getting somewhere. There are the percentages I just gave you, and this analysis shows it doesn't really matter if it's full at 4 feet deep at the bottom, or if it's average at 1.5 foot over the course of the year. Those percentages stay pretty much the same. Now, here's the thing. The water management district option is only going to add slightly to the reservoir capacity, which is 240,000 acre feet. We're going to, our H1 option sends twice as much water south. And our H2 option sends 4 times more water south than the district's option. So what that means is the reservoir flow-through cycles per year are going to be almost 3 in the case of the H1 option, meaning that reservoir will empty and fill 3 times during the year. In the H2 option, more than 5 times during the year. What that does, 5 times 240,000 acre feet, that's 1.2 million acre feet annual capacity of the reservoir. All of a sudden you've expanded your reservoir by a factor of 5 because you have lots of STAs where you can put that water out, it gets clean, and then you send it south. Okay, sorry for all that stuff. Let's go back to simple. Okay. You saw this before? They're the 2 SERP goals. So that's a graphic that's pretty easy to understand. So let's lay the 4 options out on that. The pink is the district's flow improvement, goal 1, almost meets the SERP goal. The Everglades Foundation improves on it a little bit more than the SERP goal. We double the SERP goal with H1 and H2 4 times the SERP goal. What we really care about living here is reducing flows to the estuaries. Down at the bottom, the district's option, just over 50%. Everglades Foundation, mid-50s. Hybrid option 1, about 75% there, a little short of that. And option H2, more than 90% of the discharges would be reduced. You wouldn't need to reduce them, or you wouldn't need to send them to the estuary, because that water would be going south. A nice editorial in the Stewart News. Don't do a half-baked job on the reservoir. Proposals from the district for cutting discharges are just more than 50%. That simply isn't enough. The same editorial. Half the discharges still harm our environment. Half the algae still harms our businesses and our people. This is a historic opportunity. Let's not get it half right. Okay, now, let's take another look at that outside the box option. The Guardians of Barton County, I've been writing water policy position statements for the Guardians for the last couple of years, and our most recent one was just last week. And it starts out by saying the district's preferred alternative is suboptimal, it's insufficient to ensure survival of the Indian River Lagoon. The district estimates its preferred alternative reduces discharge volume by 55%. That's as high as they've said. Next time they may say 56, 57, who knows. But anyway, it's not enough. Our position statement says we need to redesign this project so that the SERP goal of reducing by 80% discharges can be attained. If you live here, 80% is not enough. You want it all to go on. But the SERP goal is 80%, so we ought to at least get that out of this deal. Guardians continue to strongly support the water storage reservoir, but it must have adequate areas for water quality treatment. Otherwise, the water is not going to go south. There's a court order that those standards are to be enforced. Every gallon of water sent south is not discharged into the estuaries. In order to meet the SERP discharge goal, you need more than 35,000 acres of additional land. There is an adequate amount of land owned by the state in the vicinity of the reservoir project. They're designated wildlife management areas. the executive agencies have been reluctant to consider repurposing these lands. The Guardians support the following actions. Build a reservoir 240,000 acre feet on the A2 parcel as per the district's option and as per the law. But use all 17,000 acres of that parcel for a reservoir with 14-foot walls, not 23-foot walls. This is what the Everglades Foundation has proposed. Start construction of the A2 reservoir as soon as possible. And then repurpose the Holy Land and Wildlife Management area, the Holy Land, 35,000 acres, which by itself would reduce the discharges by 50%. Add the Rotenberg to that, you'd reduce discharges by 69%. Add the discharge reductions from other authorized Central Everglades project plans, and you add another 26% to the discharge volumes for total reductions then of 76% or 95%, depending on whether you use one or two of those wildlife management areas. Identify lands in the very near future that could be acquired with Land Acquisition Trust Fund monies, the so-called Amendment 1 of 2014, which I'm sure you all voted for. Yep. And add these lands to the state's wildlife management inventory. You got a really good example. Allapattah Flats was acquired in early 2000s by the district and by Martin County. And there's a happy deer hunter right there. He's smiling so hard you probably don't recognize him. Anybody recognize him? Gary. That's Gary. He said, be sure to talk about Allapattah Flats. Gary's been very helpful to me on this and the other projects I've done. So yeah, I looked at the data for the first 5 years of the hunting harvest data from the Wildlife Commission. More than 50 deer per year, more than 80 hogs per year, and about 12 turkeys per year on these 20,000 acres. How many turkeys in the Rotenberg and Holy Land? 0. How many hogs in the Rotenberg, Holy Land? 2. How many deer? 23 per year. 64,000 acres. If repurposing the WMAs is infeasible, then amend the law so that private lands can be acquired by eminent domain. You have no other choice. But do we really want to go to court against the fine rules?
Yes.
I knew that I'd probably hear more yeses. That's a really expensive, long, dragged out fight. If there are other ways, if there are alternatives to go to court, let's explore them. Let's talk seriously about it. It'll take time, money, and political will. Meanwhile, start to build the reservoir. I wrote about this. I call it the third rail. Nobody wants to talk about these wildlife management areas. I said this to Senator Negron on January 4th. And Eve Samples, editorial board chief for the newspaper, said, I think there's a guest column in what you said tonight. I said, I think there is too. And there it is for your edification. I've already told you what's in it, so I don't have to take anything from that. So I waited for that to get published on January 30th, and then I packaged it up with a letter to the governor, along with a paper that Joe and I wrote, and the Guardian's position statement. We had an earlier one that wasn't as pointed as this one. Sent those along to the governor. I said, I'm one of those guys who believes that neither of the reservoir footprints proposed by the district comes close to being the optimal configuration called for in the law. They both fall short of the SERP goal of reducing by 80% of discharges. If we had additional lands for water quality treatment, we could send more water south. The reservoir could be emptied and refilled several times during the year. 3 to 5, as I showed earlier. This would ensure that the taxpayers are getting their money's worth for this almost $2 billion project. Additional land, of course, has been the sticking point all along. Good news, the project footprint can be expanded by repurposing the state-owned wildlife management areas. These wildlife management areas are owned by the Internal Improvement Trust Fund. The Board of Trustees, you and your cabinet, Governor Scott, has a duty to hold these lands in trust for the use and benefit of the people of the state. Environmental groups say the project needs to stretch out onto more land. It's bordered on the south by the Holy Land Wildlife Management Area, Tyler Treadway says. Expanding the project without interloping on public land, he's referring to the wildlife management areas, is to go north, and most of that land is Florida crystals. The Everglades Trust, in a blog post or a Facebook post, said, we clean polluted water in the EAA with STAs that really work well. We're telling you that if this is not done, they will be gunning for the Holy Land in Rotenberg. I don't know who they are. Joe and I guess. They're already laying the groundwork for that move. Joe and I are. I don't know if anybody else is. And then a guest column rebuttal. Saving the Everglades shouldn't mean disrupting our wildlife areas. Okay, these are pointed out. They're important recreation areas. You can go and relax there and watch birds. You can take your new camera and try it out. Well, come on up here and try it out on some blue-green algae. You get some really, really abstract art. Public health impacts. I'm going to go through this very quickly because you all know this. We've got an emergency. Public health impacts. Lake O is polluted. It sends nutrient and sediment to the estuaries. It discharges in summer include algae. Mid-2016, you can see that algae from space. Blue-green algae, cyanobacteria, officially in the biological world. Algae fears are blooming after the discharges increase. 2016. So a news reporter flew over in a helicopter. He said, this shows the flow from the lake to the St. Lucie Lock to the St. Lucie River. This can't be good. I think he's right. We got harmful algae blooms. They occur when colonies of algae go out of control. They produce toxic or harmful effects on people, fish, shellfish, marine mammals, and birds. Not too pretty either. And it goes out to sea. And we've got to close beaches. The estuaries east and west get too much fresh water, adversely affecting ecosystems. What happens to the Everglades and Florida Bay? They don't get enough fresh water. Human illnesses, though rare, can be debilitating, even fatal. The harmful algae blooms have the cyanobacteria, blue-green algae, produce microcystins. These are liver toxins and harmful to large mammals. Okay, this is a study published in 2015, came out of Ohio State University. It correlates deaths from non-alcoholic liver disease with cyanobacteria blooms. If you got red dots, the dots are counties in this analysis. It's county by county. Then you got high death rate and high cyanobacteria blooms. In Florida, the death rate in these 4 Florida counties, it's nowhere else in Florida where we have this problem, to the extent we have it here. The death rate is twice as high as the national rate. And the study did not include the blooms in 2013 and 2016. Oh, it would probably be worse. Okay, They're also in cyanobacteria. There is a chemical called BMAA. I don't remember what that is. I never knew really, but I can look it up for you.
Methyl amine or something.
Okay, thanks, Marty. Pretty close, pretty close. You did better than I would. It's a neurotoxin, and scientists are attempting to link it to test their hypotheses that there's a link to neurodegenerative diseases like ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, and Alzheimer's. Autism in children. Yeah. I caution you though, don't say that it causes it, because it's a hypothesis at this point. A lot of science has to be done before we can say that there's a link. But nevertheless, the message is pretty clear. Stay out of the water. Do you really need a sign to tell you that? Look at it, stuff. And it's not just Martin County.